In the heart of a nondescript town, nestled between the dreary sprawl of monotonous suburbia and the wild, untamed forests that bordered it, there stood a supermarket. This was no ordinary market, its existence was almost an anomaly, a misplaced relic of a bygone era. The building, with its faded sign, read Everglen Supermarket, and it wore the patina of time like a proud, yet forgotten, monument. The town's residents seldom spoke of Everglen. It was as if the market, with its shadowed aisles and lingering sense of unease, existed in a realm slightly askew from their everyday reality. Yet, it was inescapable, a necessary purveyor of goods for those who dared to tread its linoleum floors. Our tale begins on a particularly overcast afternoon, when the brooding sky seemed to press down upon the town with a tangible weight. It was on this day that Michael, a young college student living on the outskirts of town, found himself venturing into the heart of Everglen Supermarket. Michael, with his logical mind and practical disposition, had always scoffed at the whispered superstition surrounding Everglen. To him, it was just a store, albeit an old and slightly creepy one. He needed supplies for a study session, and Everglen was the closest option. As he pushed through the heavy, glass doors of the supermarket, a chill ran down his spine. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something faintly metallic. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting an eerie, pulsating glow over the aisles. The store was unusually quiet, the usual hum of shoppers and clatter of carts conspicuously absent. Michael shrugged off the unnerving silence, attributing it to the dreary weather keeping people at home. He grabbed a cart, its wheels squealing in protest, and began navigating the narrow aisles. The shelves were stocked with an odd assortment of items, some familiar, some strangely archaic, as if they had been sitting there, untouched, for decades. As he ventured deeper into the labyrinth of aisles, Michael began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The air grew colder, the fluorescent lights dimmer, and the silence more profound. He could hear his own breath, ragged and loud in the oppressive quiet. It was then that he noticed something peculiar. The layout of the store seemed to shift subtly as he moved. Aisles that should have led back to the entrance instead veered off into shadowy, unexplored regions of the market. The more he tried to retrace his steps, the more disoriented he became. Panic began to set in. Michael's rational mind struggled to make sense of the situation. He was in a supermarket, not some labyrinthine nightmare. Yet, every turn seemed to lead him further away from the exit, deeper into an increasingly alien and menacing environment. The air grew colder still, and now Michael could see his breath fogging in the air. The faint, metallic scent he had noticed earlier was stronger now, mixed with something else, a damp, earthy smell, like freshly turned soil or something long buried. Abruptly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging him into darkness. A primal fear gripped him, a fear that was ancient and deep-seated, a fear of the unknown, the unseen. In the pitch black, he could hear faint sounds, a soft, skittering noise, like insects crawling over dry leaves, a low, guttural breathing that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, and, most disturbingly, a faint, whispering voice, calling his name, drawing him deeper into the heart of Everglen Supermarket. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, a frantic drumbeat echoing in the suffocating darkness of Everglen Supermarket. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of ethereal voices, each uttering his name with chilling familiarity. His instinct screamed at him to flee, but the enveloping blackness rendered him directionless, a blind man in an unknown, hostile world. Summoning every ounce of courage, Michael fumbled in his pockets for his phone, desperate for a source of light. His fingers, trembling with a mix of cold and fear, finally grasped the device. He pressed the power button, and a weak, trembling beam cut through the darkness. The light revealed a scene that was both familiar and utterly alien. The aisles, once orderly rows of products, now seemed to twist and warp in impossible ways, as if the very fabric of the supermarket had been altered by some malevolent force. Shadows danced at the edge of his light, always just out of clear sight, but undeniably present. As Michael moved, the whispering voices fell silent, replaced by the skittering and guttural breathing that seemed to follow him. He realized with mounting horror that he was not alone in this darkness. Something was there with him, moving just beyond the reach of his light. He tried to focus on finding an exit, but the layout of the supermarket defied all logic. Aisles ended abruptly in dead ends, or twisted back upon themselves. The air was colder now, his breath a ghostly vapor in the beam of his phone's light. Suddenly, he stumbled upon an aisle that was different from the others. It was lined not with products, but with ancient, dust-covered books. Their spines bore titles in languages he couldn't recognize, some seeming to shift and change as he looked at them. A morbid curiosity overcame his fear, and he found himself drawn to the books. As he reached out to touch one, the air around him grew charged, the hairs on his neck standing on end. The moment his fingers brushed against the leather binding, a surge of images and emotions flooded his mind. He saw the supermarket, not as it was, but as it had been, a gathering place for those who dabbled in the arcane and the occult, a nexus of unfathomable energies. The visions overwhelmed him, a torrent of otherworldly knowledge and unspeakable horrors. He saw rituals performed in the dead of night, sacrifices made to entities whose names were forbidden, and the bending of reality to the will of those who wielded this ancient knowledge. As quickly as it had begun, the flood of vision ceased. Michael staggered back, gasping for air. The supermarket was once again just a building of metal and concrete, but the terror he had experienced was indelibly etched into his mind. He knew now that he was not merely lost, he was trapped in a place that was more than a supermarket. It was a crossroads of realities, a place where the barriers between worlds were thin and malleable. With renewed determination, Michael pressed on, guided by a newfound understanding of the place. He realized that to escape, he needed to understand the rules of this twisted reality. The shadows seemed to watch him, their presence a constant reminder of the unseen entities that inhabited this place. He could feel their eyes upon him, curious, calculating. Finally, he found himself in front of a door he hadn't noticed before. It was old, wooden, and completely out of place. Etched into its surface were symbols that seemed to writhe and change as he looked at them. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open, stepping into the unknown once more. What lay beyond was a realm that defied all reason, a place of darkness and fear, where the rules of the world he knew did not apply. Beyond the door lay a realm of shadows and whispers, a place that existed at the fringes of reality. The ground beneath Michael's feet felt unstable, as if it were made of a substance that was neither solid nor entirely there. The air was thick with a sense of ancient power, and the darkness seemed alive, pulsating with unseen energies. He found himself in a vast, cavernous space that stretched beyond the limits of his vision. Faint, bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting a ghostly, greenish glow that barely illuminated the surroundings. The atmosphere was heavy with an otherworldly presence, an aura of something ancient and unknowable. Michael's mind reeled at the impossibility of this place, hidden within the depths of an ordinary supermarket. The whispers grew louder here, a cacophony of voices that seemed to speak in a language that was old as time itself. As he ventured further, he began to see shapes moving in the darkness, forms that were neither wholly physical nor entirely ethereal. They moved with an unnatural grace, their outlines blurry and indistinct. Michael sensed that these were the beings that had been watching him, entities that dwelled in this liminal space. He realized with a chilling clarity that this place was a nexus of realities, a point where different worlds and dimensions intersected. The supermarket had been built upon this nexus, unwittingly tapping into its power. The air rippled around him, and he glimpsed scenes from other places and times, a dark ritual in an ancient temple, a forest shrouded in mist, worlds that defied human understanding, These visions flickered in and out of existence, ephemeral and elusive. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, more solid and defined than the others. It was a man, or something that once resembled a man, dressed in tattered robes. His eyes were hollow, filled with a darkness that seemed to absorb the light around him. He spoke in a voice that was both a whisper and a thunderous echo, filling the space around Michael. "You have entered the Nexus," he said, "a place where worlds collide. Few have walked these paths and returned." Michael, his voice barely a whisper, asked, "How do I leave this place?" The figure regarded him with a gaze that was ancient and infinitely sad. "The way back is perilous," he intoned. "You must navigate the layers of reality and find your path back to the world you know. But be warned, the journey will change you, as it has changed all who have walked these paths." With those words, the figure faded back into the shadows, leaving Michael alone once more. Gathering his courage, Michael pressed forward, guided by an instinct he didn't know he possessed. The landscape around him shifted and changed, a surreal tapestry of worlds and realities. He saw wonders and horrors that defied description, each step taking him closer to his own world, but also further from the person he had been. After what seemed like an eternity, he found himself standing in front of the supermarket's exit. The familiar sights and sounds of the world he knew were a jarring contrast to the realm he had just left. As he stepped out into the daylight, Michael knew he had returned changed. He had glimpsed the vast and terrifying expanse of the multiverse, and the knowledge weighed heavily on him. The Everglen supermarket stood behind him, its secrets hidden behind a facade of normalcy. To the rest of the world, it was just a building. But to Michael, it was a reminder of the mysteries and horrors that lay just beyond the veil of reality. And though he tried to resume his ordinary life, a part of him would always be drawn back to the Nexus, to the place where worlds collide and the boundaries of reality are blurred. For in that place of darkness and whispers, he had encountered the true face of the unknown, and it had forever altered the course of his life.